It is my sincere pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, John Boehner, a man who has been called the last of his breed. Back in 2015, at the invitation of then Speaker Boehner, and after 20 years of personal lobbying, Pope Francis became the first pontiff to address a joint session of Congress. As Speaker Boehner stood behind him, Pope Francis reminded members of their calling to the tireless pursuit of the common good, and that the chief aim of politics is this endeavor. No doubt, Speaker Boehner has committed his public life to that ideal. As part of the Gang of Seven, then freshman Congressman John Boehner rallied against corruption in the House, exposing the House banking scandal. As the third Speaker of the House from the Buckeye State, John Boehner led the drive for a smaller, less costly, and more accountable federal government. Despite being second in line to the presidency, Mr. Boehner thought of himself as just a regular guy with a big job. During his 5 years at the helm, he focused on removing government barriers to private sector job creation and economic growth, cutting government spending, reforming Congress, and rebuilding the bonds of trust between the American people and their representatives. Having worked as a night shift janitor to pay his own way through college, Speaker Boehner understood from an early age the value of hard work and education. After 25 years in Congress, Mr. Boehner retired his iconic oversized gavel and stepped down in 2015. He has since remarked that he left the House with no regrets and a hell of a lot of good stories, which I'm sure we'll hear today. Mr. Boehner has since taken to telling it how it is, to the delight of many and chagrin of my home state senator, Ted Cruz. In his recently released book, On the House, a Washington memoir, Mr. Boehner recounts the stories from the halls of power, the legislative battles won, and interacting with Presidents Gerald Ford and Donald Trump. His atypical political memoir promises to be one people might actually want to read, no matter where they're coming from politically or where they're coming from in life. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Speaker John Boehner.
Well, thank you for that very kind introduction, and I'm happy to be with all of you, and really pleased to be joined by my friend, Tim Alberta, who is a fellow with the university. And Tim, I hope you're going to show up on screen pretty soon here.
Can you see me? I'm here.
I see you now.
I know I'm pale. I may be blending in with my surroundings a bit. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here and for joining us. And Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to see you virtually. I wish that I was down there on. Are you on Marco Island? Is that where you are right now?
I am.
Okay. Well, it sure beats Michigan this time of year. But I hope you're doing well. Hope your golf game is well. So this book of yours is creating quite a stir. And what I want to know is, so far, you got a lot of famous people in your phone. You're a big deal. You know a lot of people who are A-listers. What I want to know is, what is the most memorable piece of feedback you've gotten on the book so far, either positive or negative?
Well, it's all been positive. When you hear from President Bush and you hear from President Clinton, you must be doing something right.
Well, what did those guys tell you?
Oh, they loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But you come on, you're telling me no negative feedback? You didn't?
I haven't gotten any, no. I'm sure I will, but not yet.
Well, Ted Cruz probably doesn't have your cell phone number. Otherwise, he'd be texting you, right?
Probably not.
Okay. So listen, we've got some ground to cover here, and obviously we want to get to the students and get their perspective, because they're going to ask you things that are a hell of a lot more insightful than anything I can ask you at this point. But I want to start here. I texted you I believe on the afternoon, maybe it was the evening of January 6th, because you were one of the first people I thought about. Obviously, I've spent a fair bit of time in that building in the Capitol complex, and you have spent far more time in the Capitol complex. It's a building that means a lot to you, and you are nothing if not an institutionalist at heart. You're a guy who really loves the United States Congress and loves that facility, loves the people there. And I'm wondering if you can describe for us what that day was like for you as a spectator, where you were when it happened, and what you were feeling and thinking and saying to yourself watching all of that unfold on television.
Well, I don't watch much TV, and I certainly don't watch any news on TV. But that day I got a text from one of my staffers suggesting there was a problem at the Capitol. I might want to turn the TV on. And I turned the TV on for about an hour and watched in horror. What I was watching was awful. I was angry, sad, and eventually I couldn't take it anymore. I just turned the TV off. It was one of the saddest days in American history.
And was there a part of you, I was reading in your book, this line you had, I was so interested in the epilogue of your book. You said, it pissed me off. I called on Trump to resign, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. And you go on to say, my Republican Party, the party of smaller, fairer, more accountable government and not conspiracy theories, had to take back control from the faction that had grown to include everyone from garden variety whack jobs to insurrectionists. If the conservative movement in the United States was going to survive, there couldn't be room for them. Time will tell how successful that mission will be, but I hope to be able to do my part, even in retirement. That last clause there, you hope to be able to do your part. That sounds very different from the John Boehner who I've spent the last few years talking with, who wanted nothing to do with any of this mess anymore. Did January 6th sort of stir something in you where you've decided now that you have to be more vocal, that you want to be more involved?
Well, I really don't want to be more involved. I don't want to be more vocal. But somebody's got to speak up. And my point is pretty simple. Republicans have to go back to being Republicans. With a party of fiscal responsibility, the party of a strong national defense. I mean, there are things that bind the Republican Party together and have for the last 160 years. This is not difficult to figure out. And Republicans need to figure out these days what the principles of our party are and stick to them. It's not about personalities. It's not about this group, that group. It's certainly not about personalities. It ought to be about principles.
Is that difficult, that sort of reclamation project you were describing, is that difficult with Donald Trump, with the former president, still very much in the mix and looming over 2024?
I would think so. Here's a guy that's unemployed, out of work, with nothing to do except muck around in the Republican Party. Maybe you ought to get a new sandbox.
So here's my question for you. In your book, repeatedly, you go after the likes of Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, Mick Mulvaney as agents of chaos, as people who were sort of predictably untethered from any sort of principle. And those conversations you and I have had before about some of those individuals. What's been most striking to me over the last several years, however, has been a lot of the other members of the Republican Party, people who were not at all seen as sort of right-wing renegades, not people who made your life difficult as speaker, but who have emerged as really vocal defenders of the president and have really in some ways become almost unrecognizable. I'm thinking, for example, of an Elise Stefanik, somebody who was not at all thought of as a conservative Republican, like a hardcore headbanging, troublemaking Republican, who emerged as one of Trump's staunchest defenders over the last couple of years. When you see that, do you worry that this is not just some sort of a short-term flash in the pan trouble that the party's facing, that maybe there's been a sort of wholesale hijacking and takeover of the GOP?
Well, it does concern me. I mean, I know Elise, know her well, helped her get to Congress. But what it tells me is the nature of politics today. Both parties are having their challenges. And both parties have this schism in their party between traditional Republicans and whoever these people, whatever they call themselves. I call them far right, but I don't think that really describes them. I think the same battle going on in the Democrat Party between traditional Democrats like Joe Biden and the far left, and it's the nature of politics that's driving this. People want to blame the members. It's the easiest thing to do, but members reflect their constituents. Actually, they reflect the loudest voices in their district, typically, and that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah. I think that's right. And some of this does come back to leadership. A strong hand in leadership can obviously help to contain some of the crazy within a caucus or within a conference. You write in your book about Nancy Pelosi and how she has shown this really unique ability to sort of hold things together. And you say that when she's gone, Democrats are going to be screwed. I'm thinking
Timmy, it may happen before that. All right.
Yeah.
And she's done a pretty good job over the last couple of years of holding the caucus together. But this little under the radar skirmish that's been going on is about to, I think, to be turned into a full scale war in their party. It's coming. It's just a matter of when.
Well, elaborate on that. When you talk about that, the skirmish that could escalate into a full blown war.
Well, you know what the squad and the progressives want are going to put moderate Democrats in danger of losing their seats and in danger of Democrats losing their majority in the United States House. Now, you got the same problem going on in the Senate. You know, the kind of things that Bernie Sanders wants, Elizabeth Warren wants, Joe Manchin doesn't want. The two senators from Arizona, Democrat senators, they don't want. And so they've been butting heads a bit, but really hasn't played out in its fullest. It's about to. And I think this infrastructure bill in the coming months will be the spark that sets it in motion for everybody to see.
Now, smack dab in the middle of that equation you just described is Joe Biden, the new president, only a few months on the job. He's been around. He understands these schisms for what they are. And he's in an awfully tight spot because unlike 10 years ago, Democrats don't have these big padded majorities in either chamber where they can afford to lose a bunch of votes and still pass things, right? They've got threadbare majorities. Biden knows that 2022 could be a real tough year. So you know him pretty well. You guys go back quite a ways. What's your read on how Biden tries to thread the needle here in the months ahead?
Well, he hasn't. Because if you look at everything he's said and done since his election, and especially since he took office on January 20th, he's caved to the left, caved to the left, caved to the left. And I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to hold his party together. But he's done so at the expense of trying to find bipartisan solutions to some of these issues he's really concerned about. He's between a rock and a hard place. He knows it. I know it. And God bless him. I don't know what the path forward is, but we're going to find out pretty soon.
Yeah, so obviously folks in the Biden White House would say, their justification for it would say, listen, we're not going to waste time playing footsies with all these Republicans who might talk about bipartisanship, but at the end of the day, they're going to drag this out and never get on board with us anyway, that they're just going to obstruct and act in bad faith.
Well, just look at the so-called infrastructure bill, all right? There's not a Republican I know of would ever vote for anything like that, given what they call infrastructure and given the price tag on it. Go back to their stimulus bill. Given that most of the stimulus money hadn't even been spent yet from their previous bills, here they want to spend another $1.9 trillion. Bipartisanship has to start at the beginning of the process, not throw a few bones to the minority party near the end, hoping that some will come along. It's just not the way it works.
I want to go back to this question of leadership we were talking on a minute ago, as far as Pelosi keeping her people in line. On the Republican side, you've got this, what seems like a growing number of sort of almost self-identified fringe members, people who are sort of proud to represent what would have once been considered the fringe of the Republican Party. And of course, I'm talking about the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world. How do you, as the leader of a caucus, the leader of a conference in your case, everybody's different, obviously. You wrote about this a little bit in your book. But is there a certain red line for you that once somebody crosses it, particularly with regards to racism or talking about certain conspiracy theories, is there a red line as a leader that if somebody crosses it, you have to sort of give them the death penalty or take a really harsh, retributive stance toward them in order to set an example?
Well, you don't really have that kind of power, Tim. You're elected by the members to be their leader. And on behalf of the members, you can try to corral some of these chaotic members, noise makers. You can try, but at the end of the day, the American people sent these people to the Congress, and he got no real power over them, and so it's their behavior. Now, when Steve King made some, I thought, awful remark about immigrants, I mean, I slapped him down. When some other members made some remarks about one of Hillary Clinton's staffers that I thought was over the line, I slapped them down. But short of that, there's a pretty fine line you have to walk in terms of how you manage your members.
Something comes to mind when you say that, and this is a conversation I've had with a lot of Republicans, including some friends of yours, former members, who, looking back over the last 8, 10, 12 years of Republican politics, will say, with the benefit of hindsight now, it sure seems like race and racism and nativism and xenophobia, that they have played a larger role in all of this than maybe I ever appreciated at the time. Do you think that to yourself, looking back over the past decade or so of politics?
Well, I never saw it or thought about it during my years in office. Certainly never crossed my mind as speaker, other than when Tancredo and King went off on immigrants. I thought there might have been a hint of racism there, but those are really the only two members that I could pick out that what I would put in that category.
And I guess I'm asking more specifically, not even just about members and what they might say in public, but about their constituents and sort of what the motivating, obviously you go back to the McCain-Kennedy immigration effort in 06, 07. You look at the 2013 immigration push that failed, and then obviously Trump coming down the escalator talking about immigrants being murderers and rapists, right? And there's sort of a through line there that you're trying to figure out what is it that is provoking a lot of these voters, right? Maybe not the members themselves at a certain level, but what is it that these people seem to have figured out about what triggers their constituents and makes them fearful and really motivates them to behave politically in a certain way?
Well, what has occurred to me here lately is the effects of the 2008 fiscal crisis. When a lot of people got put out of work, a lot of people's income got cut, the middle class began to shrink. Barack Obama's stimulus plan and some other things, none of that had any real impact on improving the situation. And I think some politicians, including Donald Trump, began to understand this frustration amongst some of our electorate. I mean, Donald Trump beat, at least 14 pretty good candidates for his nomination for the Republican Party. One of them I don't much care for, but the other 14 were pretty good candidates. And he won handily. Why? Because he had his finger on the pulse of this dissatisfaction with Washington and what I'll call the political class. And as a result, Donald Trump was a product of the political chaos that we've seen developing in America over the last 20 years. This widening political gap that we see in the country. It's I've never seen anything quite as wide of a divide as we have in politics in my lifetime.
Well, and I want to follow on that point, and it's not to be pedantic, but I'm genuinely curious where you connect these dots. That finger on the pulse that Trump had, as far as registering that dissatisfaction, that grievance, that sense of unfairness that wealthy people at Wall Street and Washington and the well-connected in this country play by one set of rules and everybody else gets left behind. There's no question that was a major force. But I'm also wondering about this other thing that seemed to be a major force, this dark side of politics that Trump seemed to be willing to tap into, that he got a real response out of. And you wrote about it as far as the birther controversies with Obama, and how you were surprised at how many people were buying into this, or at least receptive to it. And I'm just wondering, looking back, do you draw a line through those things and wonder if maybe this was sort of more prevalent in the minds of voters than you ever realized?
Well, I think it's pretty clear now that was far more prevalent. And the reason I use 2008 is because, in '09, 10, 11, 12, we started getting these members who, one crazier than the next. And I kept wondering, I represent constituents, but I started going to I used to have a relationship with the Tea Parties in my district. And every once in a while, I have a meeting with all the different Tea Party leaders in my district. About half of them would listen to me and believe me. The other half wouldn't believe one word that I said, not one word. And so when you've got this this lack of trust that began to grow, you have these economic dislocations that were helping to drive this. Politicians, some of them are only too willing to feed that and to grow off of it.
Mm-hmm. You said the word chaos a minute ago, and you use the word chaos in your book repeatedly, often in the context of some of these members who, in your view, didn't care about principle. They weren't there for the right reasons. They just wanted to stir chaos and sort of, by virtue of stirring that chaos, raise their profile, raise more money, and gain more proximity to influence and power. And I'm curious, your friend Jeb Bush, he used to describe Donald Trump as the chaos candidate. And when he got into office, we saw an awful lot of chaos from the White House. You described in your book how you talked to him a little bit early on in his presidency, but then he stopped calling after a while. What were those early conversations like?
Well, they weren't all that substantial. Some couple of times it was over a bill that he was going to sign or not sign. And then, it evolved into a more just typical chit chat. And I never missed the opportunity to suggest to the president, maybe he didn't want to tweet as much. Maybe he ought to reduce this, think about this a little longer, because I thought it was undermining his ability to be president and undermine his own standing, which I would argue at the end of the day, it did.
When's the last time you spoke with him?
Oh, it's probably been a couple of years.
Okay. Now, you surprised a lot of people a week or so ago when you gave an interview saying that you voted for him in 2020, despite the chaos, despite everything that you write about in the book, and him being a product and an agent of this chaos. And obviously, you talk about Supreme Court justices and policy being, standing the test of time and being ultimately more meaningful than just the tweet of the day or whatever else. But was there any point during that 4-year term of his when the chaos and the craziness and the tweets and all the weirdness got you to a place where you said, you know what, to hell with the Supreme Court justices, I can't stand this guy being in office anymore?
Well, I don't know if I go that far, but there were certainly times over his 4 years in office that I winced, and maybe a little more than just winced. But by and large, as different a personality as he is from me, the policies, by and large, I was supportive of. And frankly, I thought what he did with the federal judiciary, along with Mitch McConnell, in terms of my politics and what I believe in, it made all the sense in the world. And we got down to November of 2020. I had my oldest daughter beating on me for almost all of 2020 to vote for Joe Biden. I'd see my little 5-year-old grandson, Papa, vote for Joe Biden. Oh yeah, she pulled out all the stops. But at the end of the day, I just felt like I trust I have my misgivings about whether I really wanted to do this. But at the end of the day, I decided I would do it. What really surprised me, though, I have to tell you, Tim, is how he got 70 million votes. Now, we all know the polls were all wrong. The election was a lot closer than anyone thought. But the fact that he still got 70 million votes ought to tell you something about the state of American politics.
Tells you a lot of things about the state of American politics.
Yeah.
Where do you even start? I mean, so
that's over my pay grade.
No, it's not, because you're about to be a #1 best-selling author on the New York Times list. So nothing's above your pay grade now, man. You've got to be able to tell us the meaning of life in 30 seconds.
I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't talked me into writing a book. All right.
Well, listen, that was your first mistake, is listening to me. Hold on, I want to go back to what you said a minute ago about your daughter and your grandson and this lobbying campaign. What was it? Was it ever in doubt that you would vote for Trump? Did you have even a moment's hesitation where you thought, all right, I've known Biden for a long time. I disagree with him on a lot of things, but I know that he's not going to be doing this crazy shit every day in the White House, so maybe I'll vote for him.
Yeah, I thought about it. I thought seriously about it. I would say, a 50-50 voter for most of the year.
Yeah. And so when did you ultimately make up your mind?
I guess the day I punched the ballot and decided this is it.
Okay. And so
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I really thought that much about it. Maybe in the last couple of weeks before the election.
And how quick did you find yourself with buyer's remorse? Was it when the conspiracy theories started floating out in the 4 or 5 days after the election, or was it all the way until January 6th?
Oh, no. All this noise that went on in November and December about the election being stolen, and I'm looking for evidence. All right, show me something. I've been around a lot of election contests. I've been involved in investigating contested elections, so I know something about this. I never saw any evidence. And, they're going to court. They're not showing any evidence. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, I voted for this guy. I feel like my loyalty and trust in voting for him was being abused without any evidence. And so once we got to January 6th and what happened, I don't know what he said on January 6th or what he didn't say, but everything he said in November and December riled up a hell of a lot of people that show up in Washington on January the 6th.
Mm-hmm. And I think what might get swept under the rug, at least historically speaking, is how many Republicans in positions of influence and power went along with it. I mean, Kevin McCarthy went on television and said Donald Trump won this election. Ted Cruz, your old friend, went on Hannity almost every single night for 3 or 4 weeks there, making things up out of whole cloth, talking about how Republican poll watchers had been kept out of rooms in Pennsylvania the same day that the Trump campaign was in court admitting that their poll watchers had been in the room. There was a whole chorus of Republicans who were going along with this, not just staying silent, but going along with it. And what are you thinking to yourself during that time? Because in some sense, I would have thought that some of these folks would have finally felt liberated knowing that he had lost and saying, listen, I can finally get off the crazy train roller coaster now. But instead, they just stayed on the ride.
Tim, I've been around politics for 40 years. I was elected an elected position for 34 of those. I thought I knew something about politics, but clearly these days, I don't know much about politics. I don't get it. I don't understand it at all.
So you a few years ago, you described the Republican Party as off somewhere taking a nap, right? And implied in that is that, someone who takes a nap eventually wakes up, or else, they're dead. Is the Republican Party still taking a nap? Is this something that they wake up from at some point? Or have you started to ponder the possibility here that maybe, just maybe, there is some sort of real inflection point that we're approaching here? Maybe it's the breakup of the party altogether. Maybe it's, where do we go from here in your party?
Tim, I believe, as I said earlier, the only real answer is to get back to being a Republican and standing up for what being a Republican means. It's the only way to move the party ahead. And at some point, the leaders will attempt to do that. They have a tough job. These days, all the leaders in Congress, both parties, have a tough job. And governing in a very divided country like this today is almost impossible. As you pointed out earlier, you got a 50-50 House, you got a 50-50 Senate, and a president who won narrowly. This is not a prescription for a one-party government. It's certainly not a mandate for one-party government. And I know what, God bless, I love Joe Biden, but at some point he's going to have to look in the mirror and realize that the path they're on is not the path that's going to lead to a successful presidency. So anyway, the leaders got a tough job. I don't want to criticize them, make their job harder. But you're going to see the same thing play out on the Democrat side. I know you want to talk about Republicans. It's easy to beat up on Republicans, but just watch. You got the same issues on the other end of the political spectrum that Nancy Pelosi is dealing with, and Chuck Schumer is dealing with, and they're going to be dealing with in a much bigger way soon.
What's your present relationship with Joe Biden? Did you guys chat at all at the inauguration?
No, I didn't go. I wanted to go to the inauguration, really wanted to go because I thought I should be there. But because I hadn't gotten my shot yet, and the security situation in DC being what it was, I finally decided I'm not going. And so I didn't go. But I've not talked to Joe Biden. So I don't.
Let me ask you a tactical question here. Joe Biden, of course, was Barack Obama's vice president, and he watched in that first midterm after Obama was elected how Republicans won the biggest midterm landslide in modern American history, and squandered away a huge majority in the House and darn near squandered it away in the Senate. And Biden might just be thinking, you know what, no matter what we do, no matter how bipartisan my approach is over these next 2 years, we're going to lose control of Congress anyway. So why not just go for it, right? Do you think that that's a possibility as far as how he's thinking?
That could be a possibility. But the votes aren't going to be there in either the House or the Senate. You know, the House majority now is 2 or 3 votes. Switch makes the difference. And you know what those moderate Democrats want in the House is they're trying to hold on in 2022, and that means the things that the far left is demanding of Biden are going to push them right out of office. It's not a good playbook, but he could think, hey, we're going to lose the majority. I'm also going to try to get what I can. Good luck.
All right, so I want to go back to something that we've talked about before and I've always bothered you about, and you've never given me a satisfactory answer. So you wrote in your book about how immigration reform was one of your regrets, that you were never able to get immigration reform done, but you also talk about how the Senate bill that passed in 2013 was too big, that it needed to be broken up into smaller pieces. But you say in the book that the bill was dead on arrival in the House. Now, it might have been dead on arrival with the majority of your majority, with the Republican conference. Obviously, we know that. But had you put the bill on the floor as it had passed in the Senate, we both know that it probably would have passed on the House floor, right? So it wasn't really dead on arrival.
It might have passed. I don't know who the new speaker would have been, but it might not have passed.
So the reason
remember, now you know this, but maybe your students don't. A leader without followers is simply a man taking a walk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the members elected me. And so I've got a responsibility to lead the members. They've given me the responsibility. But when a majority of the members really don't want you to do something, you really can't do it. You can, but you're not going to be there very long as the leader. So it's a delicate balancing act from time to time. I thought there was a better way to get to immigration reform. Unfortunately, I had a committee that refused to work on the issue, refused to move a bill. I had a bipartisan group of members, R's and D's, had been working on this for 5 years, even when I was the minority leader. And they were very close to an agreement. There's nothing I would have made my heart happier than to bring out 4 or 5 bills that would have ended up being a comprehensive immigration reform bill that would overhaul the entire program because it's a mess. And but anyway, it didn't happen. Wish it had, but didn't.
The reason I continually bust your chops about this is because if you chronicle this past decade of Republican politics, for me, having been in the middle of all of it, covering all of it, the immigration issue, that fight over immigration, is the reason why Ted Cruz gained so much oxygen. It's why Donald Trump ultimately gained so much oxygen. It's why John McCain suffered so badly in the 2008 Republican primary. It became this, I mean, I know that we've seen it as a wedge issue used by Democrats for sure, but it was also a wedge issue used internally in Republican politics And you have to wonder, had immigration been solved in 2013, then Donald Trump maybe never even comes down that golden escalator. Or if he does, he certainly doesn't have the ammunition that he had to rile up the Republican base.
Tim, just consider this. If we'd have done immigration reform, it could have been worse.
I think so.
It could have been a lot worse. They could have cherry-picked things out of the immigration bill, allowing those that were here to become legal, a process that we set up. There's a lot of things they could have cherry-picked out of this that I would argue could have made the situation in the party even worse than they are today.
But would it have made the situation at the border better? Would it have helped? Would it have helped to solve the problem with the nation's immigration system?
No, I think the border problem, how we handle them at the border would have been different. But the border crisis is going to be there regardless of any immigration reform plan that ever passes. Tim, to the rest of the world, the United States is utopia. This is the land of milk and honey. And the whole world wants to come here because who wouldn't want to come here to get a job, raise your family in a safe place? That's why they risk their lives to come here. And I don't care how wide the oceans are. I don't care how high the walls are. They are going to come because this is utopia. This is the place.
So I want to ask you one more thing about Trump. The impeachment, the first impeachment you write about in the book, and you talk about your regrets with the Bill Clinton impeachment and how impeachment is a last resort and should not be a partisan process. But I want to fast forward to the second impeachment vote. So clearly you were not in favor of the first impeachment process against Trump. And obviously no Republicans in the House voted for it. Romney did vote to convict in the Senate. Obviously, after the election, there was a second impeachment, and 10 House Republicans, including some Republicans from very safe districts, they voted to impeach Trump. And then you had 6 Republican senators, including your buddy Richard Burr from North Carolina, voted to convict. Were you supportive of that second impeachment effort?
I thought it was really a waste of time. The man his term was over. He was leaving. It was I don't want to call it a political stunt, but it was all politics, and it didn't mean anything.
Well, but how could it be a waste of time if the president of the United States incites a bloody insurrection, as you wrote in the book? If that's not worthy of impeachment, then what is?
Tim, I'm retired. I'm sitting in Marco Island, Florida, and it was just more political theater that I didn't think that the country was helping the country in any way, shape, or form. I'm just an ordinary voter. Ordinary citizen. That's how I looked at it.
Okay, last point on that. Are you concerned that he could run again? Because obviously, had he been convicted, he would not have been able to run for office again.
That's a separate vote, as I understood it at the time, than straight up conviction. Listen, I don't know what he's going to do. We're going to have a lot of candidates in our party attempting to get the nomination in 2024. It's a long way off. I'll keep my eyes open and see what happens.
It is a long way off. Is there anybody that you're looking at early on in the process who you think could have a promise?
Well, I've been a fan of Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, for a long time. She's a House member, a really good House member, smart. She's played kind of an interesting persona in this new political world.
Okay, so I want to revisit a couple of things that you and I have talked about going on the last 4 or 5 years here. You said to me once, when you were sort of bemoaning the fierce partisanship and polarization in this country, you said it's going to take something, an intervening event was how you described it. You said it's going to take an intervening event in this country to make us realize that we are not Republicans, not Democrats, but we are Americans, right? Like after 9/11. And I said, what do you mean by an intervening event? And you said something cataclysmic. Now, I think a lot of us could look at COVID-19 as something pretty damn cataclysmic, right? And yet it seems to have only further exacerbated that polarization, that partisanship. What do you think of the last 15 months in this country?
No, I think the COVID crisis did more to drive us apart Listen, it's hard to figure out what the truth is these days. You've got journalists, you've got cable TV, you got talk radio, and then you've got every social media platform known to man. And the blabber that comes out of all this is still pushing people further to the left, further to the right, and furthering the divide in the country. And COVID did nothing but exacerbate the whole thing. So I don't, at some point, Americans are going to wake up one day and realize we're Americans first. Maybe we're Democrats or Republicans second, or liberals or conservatives. But they have forgotten that. I don't know what triggers this, but there's a day coming at some point.
Are you confident in that, though? I mean, that's my follow-up. Because I hear you say that, and you make it sound like it's an inevitability. And a lot of people want to feel that way, that, we're America and we always get through these hard times. But we are a pretty young country, and we are a pretty young experiment in democracy. And we've seen other experiments in democracy in history. As you know, you're a big history buff. We have seen these experiments go awry before. Is there any part of you, after the COVID-19 crisis, after the insurrection at the Capitol, after everything we've seen, is there any part of you that steps back and starts to wonder that maybe, just maybe, we are headed in a dark direction here?
Absolutely not. We're the most resilient people God ever put on earth. We always figure it out. Sometimes it takes us a while, but we always figure it out. And we'll figure this out too.
You joked with me once when I asked you about playing golf with Obama again, now that you're both retired. You said, that might just happen. I might have to get a tee time with him. Any update on that? Have you and Obama played golf?
No update.
Have you heard from him about the book?
No, not yet.
Okay, so you heard from W and you heard from Clinton, but you haven't heard from Obama.
No, not yet.
Okay, interesting. So now if the four of you got together and played, who would win?
Well, that's a good question. Probably Bush and I still play pretty decent golf. I'd say we'd have a pretty good shot. Okay.
Obama's had a lot of time on his hands now the last few years, though, so he's probably gotten a lot better since the last time you saw him.
Maybe.
Okay. So
I'm sure in his own mind he has.
He couldn't resist, huh? You just couldn't resist. Okay, so let me ask you a final question here, and then we're going to turn it over to these bright young students who I've got to tell you, in relation to my last question a moment ago, if there's one source of optimism I have, I got to tell you, man, doing this fellowship with these kids after the election, when I was ready to walk into traffic, these kids brightened my day and buoyed my spirits. It's the youth of this country, I think, that might just save us after all. My final question for you before we get to them. You told me when we were playing golf together some years ago for this magazine story I was writing about you, that in retirement, you were in search of your purpose. And it was something that was keeping you up at night a little bit, wondering, I'm in this final sort of phase of my life now. What is my purpose? It seems like maybe writing this book and airing a lot of these grievances is part of the purpose. But is there a broader purpose, a bigger purpose that you've discovered here lately?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to be the best grandfather I can be. I've got two grandsons that are 5 and 3, and that's a pretty big job, trying to be a hero to my two grandsons.
That is a pretty big job. It's a pretty important job as well. All right, listen. Anybody who has not purchased the book On the House by former Speaker John Boehner, you need to. I can tell you, having read a million Washington books, it's actually very good and very entertaining and well worth your time. And
did you like the book, Timmy?
So I actually really did, and I was afraid that I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be able to lie to you if you asked me, but I really did. You had a lot of good anecdotes, some things I'd heard from you before, but a lot of things I hadn't heard from you before, so I did enjoy it. It was a good read.
Sound like me?
Most of it did, although you held back on the profanity quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, right.
No, you did. There were quite a few. There were quite a few passages where, in my mind's eye, I'm thinking,
I got it.
He would have been cussing here.
I might have cleaned it up a little bit.
You did clean it up a little bit. And by the way, you've gone 45 minutes without having a smoke. I'm really proud of you.
I know. That's because I'm doing this Zoom with all of you and your students.
You don't want to be a bad influence on the youth of America.
Nah, I can't do that.
All right, let's see here. So we're going to go to the questions. And first up is Elizabeth Snyder. Elizabeth, if you want to unmute yourself, there she is. Hi, Elizabeth, fire away.
Hi, thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Elizabeth Snyder, and I'm an incoming first year in the college class of 2025, calling in from my high school just outside of DC. So, Speaker Boehner, you spoke a little bit about the rise of the Tea Party after the 2008 financial crisis. So, in that vein, how do you think the pandemic will affect the rise of more far right or far left candidates in 2022, or even a potential party realignment?
Well, I don't know that the pandemic is going to necessarily cause anything to happen politically. What we've seen during the pandemic, though, is that the left tends to want to go one way and the right tends to want to go another way. It's probably added a little fuel to the fire, pushing people further apart. But I don't see anything particular with regard to the pandemic that would cause anything significant more than what we've seen over the last year.
Speaker, let me piggyback there on what Elizabeth asked you. Were you surprised, even as far as the little things like wearing a mask or getting vaccinated, when you see the poll numbers are so lopsided between Republicans and Democrats on some of these issues? Does that surprise you?
I guess it did, because I thought it made common sense to wear a mask. Nobody had to tell me to wear a mask. All right. I just thought it made an awful lot of sense to wear a mask, but my God, yeah, people took it as an affront to their freedom. I was pretty shocked by it, and then it just kind of went on. We watched what went on in your home state of Michigan. And what's still going on in Michigan, and boy, it gets a lot of people riled up.
Yeah, it does. That's an understatement. All right, let's go to Andre Ganawala. Andre, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Speaker Boehner. My name is Andre Gonowell. I'm a second-year MPP at the Harris School. I'll be graduating this June, actually. Before I ask my question, first I want to say I appreciate your book cover. While I can't toast your service with a glass of wine, I'm going to toast it with a cup of tea. So, but here's my question. It's on foreign policy. So what threat to our foreign policy and our international security goals does our increased political polarization have? So as we see the increased competition with China, a return to great power competition, does the emphasis on nationalism within the GOP, these ideas around America first, and isolationism within the far right and the far left, does that cause irreparable harm to the U.S. presence in international institutions?
Oh yeah, it sends a signal to our enemies around the world that America is divided. It sends a message to them that America is weak. They're not used to open, transparent democracy. And so they look at what we're going through as weakness. And so whether it's China, Iran, Russia really doesn't matter anymore. And they think they matter, but they don't. But Iran and China are the two that I'm most concerned about. And I can imagine what they're thinking. I know how they think. How they operate, especially the Chinese. They've got to be loving us.
Speaking of America First, I'd be remiss if I didn't interject and ask you about this new brand of knuckle dragger in the House of Representatives. These folks who want to form an America First caucus based on Anglo-Saxon pride and heritage. I mean, just when the dog whistle got a little too shrill, they decided to pull out the foghorn, huh?
Well, apparently this was falling apart before it got started. It was one of the dumber things I've seen. But when you look at the people associated with it, why are you surprised? I mean, any organization that involves Louis Gohmert would never involve me.
And you've been hard on Louis Gohmert over the years, but you've always given Paul Gosar a pass, and he's a real piece of work too. I just wanted to point that out.
I'm in full agreement.
Okay, we're going to go to Andrew Langford. Andrew, why don't you go ahead? There you are. Fire away.
Hi, Speaker Boehner. I'm a senior in the college, originally hail from Florida, so a little envious of that Marco Island weather. But my question today is this. You've recently called mass shootings a national embarrassment, and President Bush has discussed the need for immigration reform. What needs to change for Republicans to actually advocate for controversial legislation while in office?
Well, on these two very controversial issues, the key is trying to find some common ground. We know Democrats know where Republicans can't go. Republicans know where Democrats can't go. The question is, where's the common ground where we can move ahead? Immigration, frankly, I think we've been very close for a long time. But when the border gets heated up and all these problems show up at the border, this is not the time to move legislation. It's just, the ground's on fire. You try to legislate in the middle of a storm, you're asking for lots and lots of trouble. On the gun issue, trying to find common ground has been very elusive over the years. But there's some conversations going on right now, which frankly, I'm hopeful that they'll be able to come to some agreement on something to help us.
Andrew, thanks for the question. Speaker, what he's getting at there, I think, is even a deeper question of how do you incentivize members of Congress to do something that's going to alienate their own constituents, right? Because something that they might know in their heart of hearts is a good vote to take, but politically it's a really bad vote to take. How do you incentivize people to find that courage?
Well, your first part of your premise, you're asking people to vote against things their constituents don't want. Listen, their constituents made them their representatives. All right, that's how they got to Congress. You don't stay in Congress, or you're voting against your constituents' interest. Now, trust me, I did it several times, probably more than several times. But I went out of my way to explain why I was doing what I was doing. NAFTA was very unpopular in my district, but I knew it was good for America, and I was going to vote for it. I spent a year trying to convince my constituents that NAFTA was good. I'm not sure they ever bought it, but they kept reelecting me. But you can't get members to do things their constituents don't want. Remember, members reflect the views of their constituents. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be members.
That's right. Although you said earlier that they reflect the loudest voices of their constituents.
Well, there's too many members who listen to the loudest voices.
Right.
I was pretty fortunate that I really didn't have. I heard them, and I kind of swatted them away from time to time when I thought they were wrong. Remember, Tim, one of my old adages: if you do the right things for the right reasons, the right things will probably happen. Just don't worry about it. And that's what I try to do every day.
I had this conversation with a few of your former colleagues after January 6th, with so many of their constituents in their districts riled up about election fraud and all these conspiracy claims being hurled by the president. I just wonder if January 6th would have ever happened had more elected officials stood up and told their constituents something they didn't want to hear in those 6 weeks between the election and when things actually, jumped off at the Capitol. Because I think that's again to the heart of Andrew's question, is not necessarily voting against their interests, but telling them something they don't want to hear, right? It's the hardest thing to do in politics.
Oh, it sure is. But I think members were waiting for the facts. They heard the president out there, but members were probably waiting for the facts to show up as well. I kept waiting for the facts. It never quite showed up.
Yeah. Okay, we are going to go to Yang Xiong. Yang, where are you? Do you want to pop up? Let's see. There you are. Fire away.
Great to see you again. Thank you, Speaker Boehner. My name is Yang. I'm a grad student in sociology. So the concept of deep state is thrown around, often without clear definition. Aside from ill-defined cultural signaling and symbolic crusade, little interest is shown by politicians, media, or activists alike in clarifying what the cabal is and is not, and in communicating where the agency lies in effecting change in view of all the political constraints and opportunities. So, in your opinion, to what extent is this widespread belief in the deep state a symptom of a growing representation gap in the system of representative democracy in the United States today? In particular, how does the weaponization of filibuster in the Senate contribute to this representation gap?
Well, let me just deal with two issues here. The so-called deep state I find rather amusing. I talk about it in my book. Other than every once in a while, and we saw this with the Justice Department and the FBI and their conduct during the Russia investigation. I got to tell you, I was appalled at some of the activities of members of the Justice Department, members of the FBI, in terms of their investigation of Donald Trump. I could not believe it, because for a guy who's been around Washington for 30 years, the so-called deep state, I never saw it. You could be journalists who've been there forever. I don't know what people mean, but people love to believe in conspiracies, and people love to tell other people conspiracies. It's remarkable to me the people that believe all this nonsense. That's issue one. Issue two, you describe it as the weaponization of the filibuster. Now listen, the filibuster has been around for 100 years, longer. The filibuster has been what's provided equilibrium in the Senate for all these years. And it's there so that the Senate doesn't look like and act like the House. And so if the Senate got rid of the filibuster, there'd really be no reason to have a Senate because it would look and act just like the House does, which is not what the founders envisioned. And so the filibuster didn't go anywhere. People love to talk about getting rid of the filibuster. Trust me, the votes are not there. Democrats could never do this on their own because the votes aren't there. So not going to happen.
Still counting votes, even in retirement. All right, so Mr. Speaker, we're going to close on a couple of questions here from let's see, from Sarah Bloomquist, and I'm going to read them for her. First question is a great one. I love this. You have had the good fortune of some great staffers working for you over the years. It's what separated your office from many others in the leadership. And in this reporter's opinion, you had a lot of great staff that worked for you, and that makes all the difference, as you know. And Sarah wants to know, what makes a great Hill staffer?
Well, be attentive, be on time, look like you know what you're doing, work hard, and hope you have a good boss who appreciates you. And dress the part. I said it. Look like you know what you're doing.
Oh, look like, yeah, sure, I suppose. But I just want to be clear on this. I would not have worn a jacket and a tie for anybody else.
Well, you shouldn't have today.
For fear of being judged by you.
You look like a doofus.
It's not very nice. This is one of my.
Well, look at you.
What are you talking about?
You never wear a coat and tie.
Well, I'm trying to look the part. I'm not a staffer.
All right. Well, I don't want to embarrass you in front of your students and your friends.
Well, you've already done that. You called me a dude. All right. And the final question from Stephanie was, from Sarah Bloomquist was, oh, this is a dandy. What is your favorite bottle of wine?
I'm a Cabernet Sauvignon guy, and I'm not that picky about which one. I drink Opus once in a while if somebody gives it to me. But I'm a Cabernet drinker. Nothing. I don't need expensive stuff. Just something red and smooth.
So when the New York Times bestseller list comes out, and I believe it comes out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, I forget. I made it once upon a time, although I didn't hit number one. So if you hit number one, I'm sure I'll be subjected to all kinds of shit talking from you. But when that list comes out, and if you hit number one, what's the bottle that you and the lovely Mrs. Boehner are going to be popping?
Oh, nothing special. Just another night.
And there you have it. Just
That's
another.
It. All right. Nice to see you.
Everybody, buy the book, former Speaker John Boehner on the House. Mr. Speaker, and all the students, everybody watching through the live stream, thank you for being here, but especially to you, Mr. Speaker, thank you for your time.